Resident Evil Requiem came out a week ago, and it's safe to say it has been a critically acclaimed Resident Evil game already, and it's already one of the fastest selling Resident Evil games to date. But what makes it so special is what we'll talk about in this review today. I'm a pretty big fan of Resident Evil. In fact, I went through a majority of the titles leading up to Requiem's release, so I think it's safe to say it is one of my favorite franchises in all of gaming. So I wanted to talk about it today and give my opinions on Requiem and whether you should play it or not. And I don't do reviews on a number-based scaling. I like to do it as a buy, play, or avoid scaling. Buy it means pretty much get it immediately, no questions asked. You need to play the game. Whereas play it means play it through either a subscription service when it's available or wait for a sale of the game. And avoid it means run from it like it's the plague and pretend it never existed, kind of like Resident Evil 6. If you like this content and want more reviews, drop a like on the video and subscribe if you want to see more gaming content. It's what this channel is all about here. Either way, let's get into my review of Resident Evil Requiem. Let's first start off with the gameplay. This is one of the best playing Resident Evil games that not only switches perspectives between characters, but almost feels like you're playing entirely two different games in one game. Grace's sections are more horror focused and intense, which is why Capcom suggested you play these in first person, because you really get that intensity feeling, and these parts feel more like Resident Evil 7 than anything, being that was the last real horror focused type Resident Evil game that we experienced. So, more than likely throughout all of her sections in the game, you'll be crouching on low ammo and more likely to sneak around the infected enemies, trying to make as less noise as possible. She does have one advantage. That is the infected blood that she can use, put into an ejector, and sneak up behind an enemy and make them explode with so said blood. Making it an ultimatum to get by some zombies without having to use a lot of ammo and saving up on resources, since the only weapons she really has is a pistol, some throwables like bottles and things like that, and a melee weapon at best. Which I do like, by the way. It just makes you play a completely different way than how you normally would play most Resident Evil games, where it feels like the more weapons you get throughout the game, the more confident you are at killing the infected. But since she has limited tools and limited weapons, it makes you choose your battles wisely throughout all of her sections. Meanwhile, Leon's sections, on the other hand, are the exact opposite, where you really feel the more action side of things, and his sections really feel like Resident Evil 4 Remake, which gives you a lot of enemies for you to dispose of, tons of weapons and ammo, and very little time for you to give an actual fuck about them. And these sections here are very fun, and kind of lets you relax and prepare for when you have to play as Grace again. I also should mention that in Grace's section, saving is also very scarce, especially the difficulty I played on being the classic standard difficulty. And for Leon, there are save points in the game, but there are more autosaves than actual save points throughout his sections in the game. One thing, though, I really love about Leon's section is the combat and his variety of weapons. But speaking of weapons, Leon gets a huge arsenal to work with, from snipers to shotguns, to machine guns, and finally the Requiem gun, which is just a really badass magnum. And you can upgrade all of these guns along the way with Leon, and even his hatchet that he uses to parry, just like he uses his knife in Resident Evil 4. He can upgrade both its strength and durability throughout his sections. He also does give the Requiem gun to Grace at the start of the game as well, but the ammo for it is very scarce throughout her sections, so using it is not usually a wise choice unless you get across some bigger enemies that you need to take care of. Grace also has upgrades though, but they're in the form of stabilizers, which give you a tighter crosshair and less sway when you aim down sight, and steroids, which upgrades her health, making her take more damage. Once again, making Grace's sections feel more like they did in Resident Evil 7 with her upgrades, and Leon's feeling more like the remakes with his upgrades. And did I mention the combat? Yeah, because Leon is pretty badass in this game. Not only is the parry badass, but the ability to roundhouse a zombie is as well. But now Leon also just straight up executes these zombies now, giving us, the player, the ultimate power trip when Leon's on the screen, because man, they really made sure that no one is safe whenever you jump into Leon's shoes. Also, shout out to Capcom, because you really do feel the difference between these two main characters, and not just in gameplay, but how they feel and interact with the world around them. You have the very new to this character being Grace, and you have Leon, the grizzled vet that has seen way too much of this stuff one too many times and just is had enough of it. In the first area, it's so cathartic to go back as Leon in the same area that you previously had been in with Grace, that barely survived, didn't really have all the ammo for you to dispose of all the zombies in the area, only to return with Leon and just wipe the floor with whatever enemies you didn't kill as Grace beforehand. Leon just makes it look so easy. Like, he really has no trouble just killing all these zombies. And that is something I will always give a lot of praise for, because it really is hard to make a game feel like its own thing by just doing the simple action as switching characters. But here, Capcom really nails it, and it shows the difference between someone who hasn't experienced this nightmare yet to someone that's been living this nightmare for quite some time. So it's safe to say they nailed the gameplay, and both of these characters share the spotlight equally throughout the game, so experience this change in dynamic between the two characters throughout the whole story really just keeps it fresh throughout the whole game. Also, let's get into the enemies of this game. Mainly, you'll be fighting zombies and other enemies that I will put in the spoiler section later on in this video, like the bosses and the later game enemies, but the zombies we're going to talk about now. Because the way the zombies interact with you throughout this game is really something, because they now all have their own ticks. And you especially see this in Grace's opening section at the care center, where some of them are fixated on light switches, while others, like the maids, for instance, are focused on bloodstains on the floor, and they will complain about the mess that is made the whole time. You even come across the head chef of the care center that has been infected and is always talking about food and is looking to make you the next thing on the menu. They really did something unique here in giving them personality traits, which makes these zombies stand out from the ones that you normally deal with throughout the rest of the series and games of the old. Also, they brought back Crimson Heads from Resident Evil 1 Remake. Instead here they're called Blister Heads, but they're essentially the same thing, and if you never played Resident Evil 1 Remake, look, you're missing out on one of the best Resident Evil titles, but they are essentially more powerful, faster versions of the infected zombies that get resurrected from normal zombies after they've been laying on the ground for quite some time, and the only way to make sure a zombie doesn't come back as a Crimson Head or a Blister Head is by shooting them in the head and watching their head just pop. On a different note, I did hear that some people are complaining that this game is too short, but as someone who literally beat like a majority of the Resident Evil games before playing this one, I can safely say that this isn't the case, and that these games are designed for replayability, which it has. So you can stop saying that it's too short now, because that's incorrect, because it's got the same length as every other Resident Evil game. So let's get that straight. Also, let's get into the game settings in this game. You can change your perspective to whatever you want, by the way. If you want to play it all in first person, you can do that. You want to play it all in third person between both characters, you can do that as well. You want to play Grace in first person, Leon in third person, like the developers told you to, you can do that. What about Grace in third person and Leon in first person? You can do that too. Never have I seen a game with more accessibility options with its game settings than this game. It just gives you what you want. You can change dead zones, you can change it to colorblind mode, how the game sounds, if you want surround sound headphones, if you want regular headphone sound, if you want TV speaker output, how you want the controller to feel, you want to have smooth acceleration, you want the original acceleration, or do you want to completely take it out? You, the player, can choose however you want to play. More games need to learn from this, and Capcom always sets the example on how in-game options should work. Let's talk about the visuals now, and the RE engine is definitely one of my favorite engines throughout all gaming. It looks so stunning in every iteration that it's in, and it really just seems that it just gets better and better as time goes on. They really get that realistic type of visual down pat, where it doesn't really feel too hyper realistic. It just feels realistic enough that you can just really be stuck in awe about the things around you. Like, I have never looked at so many tables and floors and marble countertops like I do in this game. And every environment you're in throughout this game is just jaw-dropping. It's stunning, and you can get yourself lost in it. Not only that, but this game runs smooth as butter too. So you get top-of-the-line visuals, and you get great frames throughout the whole game and in cutscenes as well. Although I will say I did have an issue with audio desync throughout the game on my PC version, which is kind of a bummer because it really ruined the flow of the cutscenes. But I just wanted to mention it just in case someone here had a fix for it. Hopefully you can leave that in the comments, but hopefully there will be a patch soon as well, just so they can iron out that issue. But that was the only really issue I had throughout the whole game. But speaking of audio, yeah, this game has a banging soundtrack, like the Resident Evil games of old. But this time, it is more synth-based, and really feels more like it's akin to a Doom soundtrack than anything, which isn't a bad thing at all, especially during those combat-heavy sections. And there is one soundtrack I would specifically talk about in the spoiler section that has become my new current favorite in the series. Before we get into the spoilers, I do want to say all the changes that they made to this game really feels like they put a lot of time and intention into it, and they really tried to make all Resident Evil fans like one section of the game, which is really hard to do, and the fact that they accomplished this task says a lot about what they set out to do, and it's honestly impressive. But now, let's get into some spoiler talk. So, if you want to avoid the spoilers and haven't played this game yet, I'll put a timestamp here so you can just skip to that now if you really don't want to be spoiled. Okay, cool. So, let's get into it. The first thing I want to talk about are the villains. The two major villains in this game are Gideon, which is featured heavily in the trailers, but also we have Timu Wesker in this game, also known as Xeno, who appears halfway through after Grace is done at the care center. And really, that is all the villains in this game. And the only character besides Grace and Leon is Sherry Birkin, who acts as Leon's Hunnigan from Resident Evil 4, and Emily, a child that Grace finds at the care center and takes care of her throughout the duration of the game. Also, there's a segment early on where you get to play as Grace as a teenager with her mom, Alyssa Ashcroft, who was in the Outbreak games. And I think this was a really good nod to a long-forgotten game in the Resident Evil franchise. I really wish that they remake Outbreak or remaster it, whatever. We need Outbreak again, because that game was really ahead of its time. I really do love all the characters here, especially Grace and Gideon. Capcom really does a good job at making original characters that you play as and then never see again in the series. They do this all the time. But now you have Grace here, who is just amazing. Like, honestly, her voice actor is just great. It really nails the fear that you would feel throughout these situations. It really gets that point across. And Gideon is a great villain as well. I really love both their voice actors in this game, especially Gideon too. He's just awesome, and his delivery of his lines are just simply amazing. Really, Capcom, you make such good characters. But there are other characters that I feel they kind of glossed over, like Timu Wesker himself, and just really didn't do a good enough job of explaining who he is, or where he comes from, or why he's here. He's just there, and just gets shelved and pushed aside for the most part, especially compared to Gideon. Same thing with Emily. She doesn't really get explained other than that she's eventually just a clone of Grace, and they don't really get into why most of her clones get turned into giant monsters, but I guess it's whatever. I can't really complain too much because this story is pretty self-contained for the most part, and it doesn't really venture outside a couple of characters, which is good because you don't want this game to be too convoluted and too overloaded, something like Resident Evil 6, where there was so many different characters that it was hard to keep track of what the hell was exactly going on. So let's talk about the story, since it starts off as Grace, who's an analyst for the FBI that gets told she needs to investigate some weird murders that are taking place in this Midwest town in the United States. Upon arriving there is where shit starts to really hit the fan, because after she runs right into Gideon, she's abducted by him and taken to the care center where you first really start the game. Also, Leon's investigating these same murders as well and is led into the same town where Grace is and finds Gideon carrying Grace in the street, to where Gideon just starts blasting the virus into random pedestrians' necks as he's walking down the sidewalk, which is honestly kind of hilarious. After, Gideon disappears and Leon's trail goes cold until Sherry directs him to the same care center that he took Grace to. After Leon helps Grace escape a giant monster known as the Girl, which we will get into more detail a little bit later, he is then captured by Gideon and taken somewhere else. And here is where you get the first big segment with Grace, as she discovers Emily that is being held captive, but she first has to set her free by finding the right security clearance level. After you're about to escape the care center, Emily is taken by the Girl, and you have to rescue her from captivity yet again. In the meanwhile, Leon finds Gideon's private office and finds out why Gideon's obsessed with Grace, because he believes that she is the key to Elpis, the main virus in the game. Then you pan back to Grace, as she is in the basement trying to help Emily free her from the captivity of the Girl. After you find the 3 joint plugs, which is a bitch by the way, but it's totally the scariest part of the game, you have to escape the care center and go through the underground lab to give a helicopter pilot his key back so he can fly the helicopter out of there. After all that, the helicopter ends up crashing, because of course, due to all the infected that swarm the helicopter itself, killing the pilot and leaving Grace and Emily alive, but barely. And Leon helps her from a distance with his handy dandy sniper rifle as she runs inside of the church for shelter. After Leon helps Grace, she escapes underneath the church and is led into a water plant of some sort, where she confronts the Girl for one final time before killing her with direct sunlight. After Grace returns to Emily, she has discovered she has passed, but not only that, eventually she turned into an infected monster herself, which Leon comes in to shoot Emily's infected version, effectively killing her off. Which leads Grace to be so upset that she wanders right off into Gideon and Timu Wesker's hands, and that is pretty much the first part of the game. And I think this is a great first section that leaves a lot of mystery into what is going on and what all these characters want and what Elpis is going to lead to. I also think the care center is a great location in the Resident Evil game. This part is mainly Grace's section, as her big boss here is the Girl, who seems to be this girl named Marie, who was held captive like Emily. The Girl herself is amazing, just an overall creepy monster that follows Grace and somewhat of a stalker to Grace during this portion of the game, making it highly intense, especially in the basement segment where Grace has to get back Emily. And that's where I mentioned the joint plugs and all that. That had to be one of the scariest segments in the whole game, and I hated it in a good way, though. Anyway, Grace and the villains are headed into the remains of Raccoon City, and here is where you play as Leon for the whole time during Raccoon City. This has to be my favorite segment of the game. Not only because it's just nostalgia bait, which I love, but it was handled the right way, you know, given respect to all the games that came before it, and there are just a lot of references to every Resident Evil game that took place in Raccoon City. But after going through some buildings, you'll encounter this massive spider boss, and this is definitely one of my new favorite bosses, not only because it's just a scary, gigantic spider, but in itself, it's a kind of a callback to the Black Tiger boss in Resident Evil 1 Remake and Resident Evil 1 in general, But this boss in Resident Evil 9, it's so much more intuitive. It follows you through the building until you reach a certain area on top of it, where it keeps popping in at different places around the room to chase you, and eventually you have to defeat it. Once you defeat the boss, you end up in a subway and out onto the next section, where Leon's goal is to break down this barricade to get into the center of Raccoon City, where Zeno and Gideon are headed with Grace. But before you can do that, you have to find 3 pieces of this detonator that's on the barricade so you can get through. I do like this part, and it's a nice segment filled with a lot of zombies to kill. I really like when you're scaling this fallen skyscraper and you reach the section where you have to shoot glass underneath the zombies so they fall through. I think that's pretty neat, and it's pretty unique for this series because we never really experienced anything like that from any of these other games. But from what I hear, a lot of people don't like this part, but I kind of do, because this is where you really get to experience Leon's gameplay for the first time. And it really shows you the switch up between him and Grace, because you're literally just fighting waves of zombies at almost all time during this section. And once again, Leon is so badass in this game, so he just takes like everyone out with no problems at all. I guess the only part I didn't like here, I will say, was the part on the rooftop where the infected BSAA soldiers are shooting mortars at you, and there are like 4 or 5 of them, and you have to constantly take cover while zombies are out running around trying to bite you. So yeah, that part was pretty annoying, to be honest. But after you find the detonator, Leon also unlocks a container finding a bike, and from here we get an on-rail chase sequence. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I really love this part of the game because it's just so awesome, man. Like, it really is so awesome. Usually I hate these type of segments in Resident Evil games because I really like to get to explore and unlock areas in the game, kind of like the Care Center. But yeah, this sequence here it's pretty peak. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it's peak. Just something about it, man. It's just, like, all just with like Leon racing down the abandoned highway and even up the sides of buildings while he's shooting at infected wolves, and even Gideon's here shooting rockets at you, and you have to stop him from shooting rockets at you. But after this section, you get to the part that everyone has been waiting for: Leon's return to the RPD. And just him opening those doors and hearing that iconic soundtrack and that new remix of it, literally just, it just gave me chills the first time hearing it. That part is truly awesome, and it really is the point where everything comes full circle, because going back to where it all began for Leon, but after getting lost in the memories of RPD, you find Zeno and Grace here talking about finding Elpis and why Grace is the key to all of it. During this conversation, we get reasons for the missile strike of Raccoon City and why the president was assassinated in the beginning of Resident Evil 6. So a lot of background to a lot of things that happened in the lore of Resident Evil. And here is where we come across the worst section of the game, a flashback to the Raccoon City orphanage, where we play as this orphan Chloe running around and hiding from other infected children. This whole section is just literally one giant hide and seek portion of the game, and it kind of just kills the pacing for me of the game, because it's just like, it's definitely the most annoying part. But, at least it's only a couple minutes, luckily, so it's not really that big of a deal, but still, it's kind of annoying. After that boring part is over, though, we get the return of Mr. X himself, who rudely interrupts Leon's and Zeno's conversation, by the way, but then proceeds to chase Leon around the RPD like the good old days. After you escape him, you find the way out of the RPD, but hold on, not so fast, because Mr. X is not done with you yet. Because he proceeds to throw a goddamn missile at you. Yeah, he throws that shit. He doesn't fire it from a gun. He legit throws that shit, which then leads into the best boss fight of the game, in my opinion, being the Super X fight, as I like to call it. This fight is just awesome, giving you a classic style boss fight between you and Mr. X. I mean, what else is there to say besides it just feels so sick being able to parry his oncoming attacks. Overall, it's just a cool, classic type of boss that never gets old to me. But after you defeat him, you go to the orphanage, which leads you to the underground to a subway system where you eventually rappel further down into the core of Raccoon City. And this is where you run across Plant 43. And this, once again, is a great callback to the original Resident Evil, which feels pretty cool and something I really wasn't expecting to see. But before you fight the big plant, you have to shoot all of the weaker branches along your way to Ark, which is just the final lab that this game takes place in. This boss fight, though, isn't the greatest. By the way, hell, I don't even think it's much of a boss fight, but it's still pretty cool seeing the plant from Resident Evil 1 show up here. I just think that was a cool little callback to the original Resident Evil. But right after you make it to the lab, which is Ark, shortly after, Leon finds the location of Xeno and Grace, and he is met with the elite guards. I really hate these enemies. I can't tell you. Hell, any enemy with a gun in any Resident Evil game is usually a pain in the ass, because these guys, especially these guys, because they only have to take a few shots before you're completely done. I will admit, though, they're pretty cool, and seeing them transition from cover to cover and how they move very tactically like highly trained soldiers usually do is honestly a cool touch. And it does make you have to approach them very differently. Instead of just head on, you have to take cover, wait for them not to like see you, and then shoot them in the head. Still, they're annoying as fuck, because once they really see you and get their sights on you, they don't miss. It's just pretty much game over once they spot you. But once again, these enemies don't appear often. In fact, they only appear in 2 rooms throughout the whole time of the underground lab, and then they're just done. But right after that, you run into their commander. Now, there has been a lot of speculation whether this guy is Hunk or not. I'm not really going to go into that because I don't really know for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised, since there is a lot of callbacks to older Resident Evil games, and especially Resident Evil 2 in here. But either way, this is my second favorite boss fight in the whole game, because it's pretty much just an upgraded version of the first Krauser fight in Resident Evil 4 Remake, which being the knife fight, of course. Because if you don't use your hatchet here, you're pretty much dead, especially if you don't know how to parry as well, because he will come at you with everything he's got. But after you kill him, though, or do you kill him, speculation, you make your way to Grace again, saving her from Timu Wesker, which leads you into a room filled with garbage, where you have to move a crane blocking your path, but not before Leon passes out due to his infection of the T-virus. So it's up to Grace to help Leon look for the controls to move the obstacle out of the way. And this leads into Grace's last big section of the game, where she explores Ark. And here is where we run into the Lickers for the first time. Another Resident Evil 2 reference, and one of the, I would say, better enemies out of all the Resident Evil series. These are definitely the more powerful out of all the infected enemies that you come across, especially in Grace's section. They are really scary, and it's best just to move past them only until you get the bottle of acid and are able to craft those bottles of acid. And that's just the best thing that you can do, because those really just take care of those Lickers for good. But in Leon's section, after you help him move the crane out of the way, he tries to find his way back to Xeno in the reactor room to finish it once and for all. And he has to deal with the Lickers as well. But this is the standout right here. Leon just shoots these fuckers a bunch of times until they're dead as shit. Once again, showing you not only how over it Leon is, but just how much more powerful he is than Grace. Just because, like, one Licker to Grace is just like, oh my god, this is so scary, this could finish me in, like, literally under a second. But Leon literally takes care of, like, 5 Lickers in one room without having a scratch on him. And it's just so fun, man. It's just so fun. Also, during this part, Leon has to deal with almost succumbing to the T-virus infection that is going throughout his body. So he does have like a couple of times where the screen flashes purple and he like coughs up a little bit. In fact, he's honestly so weak at that point, he eventually just lays on the door of the reactor room. His section is done because it's literally just taking over his body to that degree at that point. When then you pan back to Grace to find out what Elpis really is. And what is Elpis, you may ask? Well, throughout the whole story, you're led to believe that this new virus that is a more powerful weapon than all the viruses before, but all the way at the end, you find out that it's something indeed different. I mean, it was alluded to being more than just a virus throughout the whole game, but you're kind of also thinking, because if you played a lot of Resident Evil games, you're thinking that, hey, this is just another more powerful iteration of the viruses that came before. But you finally learn its true intentions when you play back an emo disc tape that Grace picked up all the way back in the intro. And it was an interview tape that Alyssa, her mom, did with none other than Oswell Spencer himself, aka the founder of Umbrella, and also the one who originated all the T-Virus in the first game, where he says that he's regretful for what he's done with all the viruses being made, and he wants to give people hope and a small way to correct everything that he has done in the past. And this moment right here is where you find out that Elpis is actually an antidote or antivirus to all the other viruses that came before. And I do like how we get to choose what we want to do, if we want to destroy this virus or release it. I just think this decision would have been more impactful if we didn't see this interview with Spencer till after the credits roll, because it would have made the player choice at the end seem a little bit more like a gamble, since you don't know what's going on. And since in all the other Resident Evil games, like I said before, you're out to stop whatever new strain of virus that's popped up, and you're out to stop the overall spread of this virus being let out in the world. But here it's kind of like they just give you the answer to the test before you actually take the test itself, and it kind of is a little bit disappointing because it gets rid of all the suspense and trusting yourself to do the right thing rather being handheld to do it. Yes, because I get it, Oswald Spencer, it's weird for him to have a revelation to be like, hey, I want to correct all the wrongdoings, especially since RE5 Lost in Nightmares DLC. He kind of was like, I'm a god, I should have been a god. Like, so it's just weird to hear him kind of like repent for all the things that he's done. Honestly, like, the fact that they kind of handheld you to it and kind of alluded to it was trying to make it seem like, hey, look, it's actually true. You know, this guy's not an asshole as much anymore. He's trying to repent before he dies. It's kind of lame, honestly. Like, not the whole decision, but just revealing it before you have to, you know, make the choice is kind of lame to me. But that's just my opinion on it. I mean, I still know some people choose to destroy it because, like I said, you know, if you played any other Resident Evil game, it's just a common thing to do. But since they left it to be so vague throughout the story, you kind of get the hint that it is something different. But I just wish they left some ambiguity to it until the credits roll and then you find out what Elpis actually is, the whole purpose behind it. I think that would have been better. Like I said, just my opinion though. But here's where Timo Wesker takes Elpis after you pick to release it and cures him from the disease, no longer giving him any powers. Also, Leon is cured as well, giving him a dosage of the antivirus, so now he's back to normal, so yay, we saved Leon. Which leads to Gideon coming back just in time to kill that fake Wesker once and for all by chopping his head off with his infected limbs there, infected tentacle, whatever you want to call it, which leads to our final boss fight between Leon and Gideon. The fight itself is okay. I mean, you pretty much just shoot at Gideon when he's jumping around trying to electrocute you, but his lightning attacks are easy to dodge, especially that AoE one that he does after he jumps and tries to slam on the ground. After you damage him enough, he turns into a giant BOW, and here's where you find out that he's a Nemesis Gamma. When in RE3 remake, you find out that Nemesis is Nemesis Alpha pretty much, so he's just a more upgraded version of Nemesis. But anyway, he turns exactly to the final Nemesis boss and Resident Evil 3 remake as well, where you just have to shoot all his glowing spots, and you got to keep doing this until he tries to grab you, where just Leon runs across his arm, finishes getting off for good, and you get your final cutscene where Chris Redfield's unit comes in to rescue you. Also, always late to the party, Chris Redfield is. Gotta be fashionably late, I guess. And then the truth comes out all across the world. and that is your final cutscene. And there you have it. That is what I think about all the components of the game. As to my rating, I have to say it is a must-buy for all fans of Resident Evil. If you enjoy the classics, remakes, or even the modern titles, you have to give this game a try. If you're new to the series though, I would say wait for it to go on sale, because usually down the line also as well they'll drop some DLC for the game, something like a story expansion or something along those lines, and it only has the story, so there's really nothing else to do outside of that. There's no mercenaries mode, which is something I would love to see come to this game, and honestly it does need it since there really is nothing besides it other than one new difficulty outside of the classic mode to play as. But to me, this is still a great Resident Evil game, and one that is close to my personal top 5 favorite Resident Evil games. I'm not going to put it in my top 5 just yet, because I want to play it some more before I go that far with it, because I really have to enjoy replaying the game first before I put it up there with some of the greatest Resident Evil titles of the series. But that is all I have for you today. I hope to see you on the next video. Peace.